Hey, it's the afternoon and we're live.
Hello!
Hello!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to an afternoon, Martin Luther King Day, Monday, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. It's Martin Luther King Day?
Isn't it? I mean, we don't really have anything in particularly about that. I feel like we've done that. And to me, Martin Luther King Day is a day when, like, sort of neolibs sit out and give platitude salads and yet actually do nothing for anything that Martin Luther, like, I hate to tell them this, but he was a socialist. He was see, this is the problem. The neoliberals, they only want to talk about, yes, I don't see black, I don't see white, I see shades of gray. Yeah, that's great. How about a living wage and some health care? So, it's, they
Clean
don't
water.
fight for the thing for. Yeah, he was a socialist.
When we talk about the, things like water and the environment, we're talking about what desperately need it, like communities of color that are in cities, and it never seems to work out that way. So, yeah, that's a topic we will cover a little more extensively. But obviously, first, we do have a very special guest that we have convinced from the Middle East to come on our show.
I know, she's in Palestine.
So why don't you introduce our
Okay, so guys, we're doing this as part of our Deconstructing Zionism series. And this is somebody that I reached out to a while ago, and we couldn't coordinate for the original panel groups. And so her name is Rachel, and I want to say it's Beit Arie. I don't know. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. But she's the director of an organization called Zochrot. And Zochrot, I'm horrible at that. But anyway, the basis of this organization, it was founded and created by Israeli Jews to expose the Nakba. And we've talked about that a lot on this show, but I think it's really important. And obviously, I've sort of taken that on as like a little mission to keep educating Jews, because we were never taught the proper history. And so we are going to talk about that today.
Rachel Beit Arie.
I don't think
Welcome
so. I don't
to
know.
Generational
We're going to find
Change.
Hi.
Hi. How do you pronounce
Good
your last name?
here. Good afternoon at your place. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's
Thank you so much for coming on. Double kick. Thank you so much.
How do you pronounce your name?
Beit Arie.
Oh my goodness. See, now that sounds French.
Well, it's not.
So we have been talking quite a bit here, and I don't know how much, I'm not sure what email version you got of my little history, but I'm a second generation Jew, raised in Floridian Jew, raised in North Miami Beach by very Zionist post-Holocaust grandparents, very fear-based in the thinking. And I have come to realize that. It's taken me many years to deconstruct. That's why I call this Deconstructing Zionism. And the key thing that has stood out the most for me is that we weren't even taught about the Nakba. We weren't taught that. We were taught it was a land without a people for a people without a land, which we know isn't true. And I find it so insidious, quite honestly. And I feel like it was very purposeful. I feel used and brainwashed by Zionists. And I see that now as more of a white supremacist type of movement. Like, my perspective is very different now. But talk a little bit about your organization. I know was in 2002 was when it started, but talk a little bit about what was going on that you were noticing, besides the obvious, at that time that this sort of came to be.
Right. So I was raised up like you did. I'm a third generation Jewish Zionist in Palestine. My grandparents immigrated here from Eastern Europe. And of course, I was raised on the notion that our people came to a land with no people, to people with no land, that we were the few against the many, that, there is this whole concept of Geulat Adamot, redeeming the land, and you must ask, redeeming it from whom? And this is how I was raised, and this is how most Israeli Jews are raised, of course. And Zochrot means remembering in Hebrew, female form. And as you said, the purpose of the organization, our goal, is to expose the Nakba, to educate Israelis about the Nakba, but also about Palestinian right to return, and our accountability, our responsibility to the consequences of the Nakba that everyone who lives here, Palestinians and Israelis, still feel and are subject to today. So that's the goal, and the organization started in 2002, and I don't think it's a coincidence. It's around the time of the collapse of the Oslo Accords, and after the second Intifada broke. And this is when many Israelis that consider themselves leftists, myself included, got disillusioned with the peace process. Were saying it led to more bloodshed. It didn't resolve in what they thought it would be. And I think at the time of Oslo, we all had a pretty naive and uninformed notion of what this so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict is. And we're thinking that signing some papers without really resolving the core issues will lead to a new Middle East, as Shimon Peres was saying at the time, and you know, basically better life to everyone without having to pay any price or take any responsibility for anything. And the group that started Zochrot at the time were Jewish Israelis who were very involved in dialogue groups, you know, in peace negotiations that were very popular at the time, also in the grassroots levels, and met a lot with Palestinians. And after years of doing that, came to the realization that those talks are always coming to a dead end, because for the Palestinians, the Nakba and the refugees question, that's the start of the conversation. It's a term that has to be met, that has to be addressed to have any meaningful negotiations at all. Whereas for Israelis, it's a complete taboo. We are not taught about the Nakba. We don't know anything about that. We grew up unaware that we are growing up and living and you know, raising our families on the ruins of lives of other people. And there's so much denial about that. And when you are coming from such different point of views and such different understanding of the same history, it's very hard to move forward. So this is why Zochrot was established, to start educating Israelis and informing really about the Nakba and about the Palestinian history of this land that some call Israel now. So this is really the goal. And I really identify with your story of how you been raised.
Yeah, I find that extremely disconcerting, because I really thought, okay, one of the reasons why we were so ignorant is that we're over here. We're over here, so we're not there. But now what I'm hearing from you is, so you were raised in Israel and you were still not taught about what happened right there. That's unbelievable to me. That is, I mean, no, I guess it's not. It's very believable to me, but it's so disappointing. So my next question for you is, since 2002, how have you felt you've seen your movement over in Israel? And this is something that comes up a lot for me when I'm talking about Israel, and I'm like, look, their government is no more indicative of their people than our government is indicative of our people. And you would never know that a resistance exists here, and it does. And so I know that you exist over there, that our like fellow resistance exists over there. But what kind of successes are you seeing? Because we'll never hear about what happens over there if it's good. Like anything that would be remotely anti-Zionist will not make the news here.
Yeah. So yeah, it is unbelievable, but also true. I can tell you that I grew up near Ashdod, south of Tel Aviv, formerly the Palestinian town of Isdud, that was destroyed. And I never knew anything about that. And I was growing up and there were remains of houses all around. I grew up in a farming community. Somewhere here and there in the field, there are still some now. There were more when I was growing up. And I used to think of them as some ancient remains, but they were remains of towns and villages from the first half of the 20th century. When my grandparents came to this area, there were still people living there. I never knew that. It never even crossed my mind until I got to university. And this is really how most Israelis grow up. We are told stories about ancient villages or some Bedouins that were coming and going, but not really learning about any kind of civilization that was really destroyed at the time. Now, I don't want to say that the government is not indicative of the people in Israel. I think to a large amount, it really is. And the Israeli public is taking, of course, a sharp turn to the left. Anti-Zionist Israelis are very few, although we try to be as vocal as we can. And I think we have more influence than we usually get credit for. What I can say has changed in the 20 years that Zochrot has been active is that the term Nakba itself became completely common and known to everyone. And formerly, no one even knew what it meant. The first name of Zochrot, before it was Zochrot, was Nakba in Hebrew. And one of the stated goals was to make Nakba a term in the Hebrew language. And that to a large extent happened. Everybody knows, whether they're right or left or center, they know what the Nakba is. Now, knowing what it is doesn't necessarily imply that they agree that it was a crime against humanity or that they agree that it has to be redressed. That's a different kind of work that still needs to be done. But I think that's a step forward. And even if I see, and we saw it just this weekend, some right-wing gangs, I can call them, including a Jerusalem council member, marching through the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Jerusalem and chanting, "We want Nakba now." And we hear that more and more. So it's this double speak of the Nakba never happened, but we're gonna do another Nakba if you Palestinians keep resisting. And you hear that more and more. And as horrifying as it is, I think it's a step forward from complete denial. So this veil of denial is starting to be lifted by the right, even more than by the left. And I think that's really a step forward. It's a phase that we have to go through, I'll say that.
Yeah, we're not anywhere near that here. We're still dealing with, like, we're sort of behind you on that. We're still dealing with, our legislators, the people that are supposedly knowledgeable about, geopolitical affairs. These people don't acknowledge that ever happened. And these are the people that are determining our military budget and our policy and how we deal with the state of Israel. And yet they're not even looking at real facts. And this is something that I feel like I'm still trying to get over that hurdle. I feel like I can't have a discussion with you about the best way to go forward if you don't even acknowledge what the actual history is. How are we, we're just dealing at this from two different universes. And I think that for me, I always considered myself whatever we would say now a liberal Zionist. So yes, I believe that the Jewish people were entitled to a state, but I recognize that the Palestinians should also have their space, hence this idea of a two-state solution, which now I think is ridiculous. And it's just so entitled, this air of entitlement, like because our Bible says that we're entitled to this land, we're entitled to this land. And I just can't get past that we're in the century that we're in and people are still in that mindset. It's like it's no more our history than everyone's history. Everyone's history is that same space, and yet half the people aren't allowed back in so that they can keep their majority. And it's just where do they go from here? How do we initiate a right of return?
Well, I think one of our most successful strategies to break these issues to more people is to talk about Zionism itself. And I really like the title of your show. And I think when you look at what Zionists said and wrote, and they wrote a lot, as you know, you just can't miss the connection with the colonial powers at the time. And the Zionist stating itself, the Zionist movement as a colonial movement. Herzl said Zionism is a colonial thing. And there are, dozens of very explicit quotes that I can bring from Zionists. So the connection of Jewish people to Palestine, the land of Israel, is well established. And Jewish people came to that land for generations before Zionism. And we really have to divorce these two ideas of Jewish faith, Jewish culture, the spiritual connection to this land, to the holy places, and with a colonialist movement that came there not to worship, not even to live emancipated life, but to replace other people and to take control over the land from them. So these are two very different things. And it's really all in Zionists' own words. And we need to learn them and read them more carefully to understand what Zionism is. And I think not so many people can support it nowadays anymore. Definitely not when in the US and everywhere else, the conversation about colonialism is getting more and more vocal.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about like contemporary stuff?
Well, we are speaking with Rachel Beit Arie. I think I said it right.
Yeah, I'm never going to get it.
It's like Bouter, director of Zochrot, which is an Israeli anti-Zionist organization. We have seen sort of this attempt to kind of rewind the clock with Bibi getting back into power as the prime minister. And we also, as I always like to, when I mention our congresswoman, who Jen ran for Congress against, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I'm sure you know very well, she's a completely ineffectual legislator. But when the opportunity to present any type of anti-BDS legislation, she is right at the forefront. In fact, she's either a draftee or a co-signer, right at the top. Here in South Florida, you have one of the biggest Zionist contingencies in the whole country. So it is very difficult to fight back, even tepidly on that front, to try to bring people along. But I agree with what you're saying. Even with a congresswoman as bold as Rashida Tlaib, who is willing to take the slings and arrows, and she's doing it right now. As soon as Congress got into session, she immediately got on the House floor and started talking about how Israel is an apartheid state and we have to do something about it. So continuing to fight on that front, I think, is very important. So on the one hand, down here, we do have the contingency of the Israeli Zionist movement that is still very strong. There are still Holocaust survivors who continue to perpetuate that myth, if you will, that if there isn't, if we're not warding off all of the Palestinians, then Israelis, Jews will cease to exist. And then on the other hand, you do have this growing movement of individuals, including congressional representatives, thankfully, that are finally starting to speak up about the half-truths, or if not complete falsehoods, about the realities of what it's like to be in Israel. How do you see it evolving as we go forward? Because I know that there are those who are going to continue to cling to AIPAC and DMFI. But there is a growing contingent of people who are starting to fight back against that. I would say the biggest problem that you have in the Democratic Party right now is that I do believe one of the reasons Hakeem Jeffries was named the successor to Nancy Pelosi is because he's in bed with the Israel lobby as hard as anybody on either side.
It's scary.
He's really in there, and I think that had a lot to do with it. So I do think that this is going to be like it would go forward. How do you see it unfolding from an American politically going into this next set?
Well, obviously, the U.S. Political arena better than I do. I think, in a way, this government of horrors that we just got elected, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think it can be an opening to more delegitimization because it's so rampantly racist, anti-democratic. And I was honestly really worried last year when the so-called government of change came to power with the Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, which we called Change for the Worse, that internationally they will be received as some kind of actual change for the better, as more legitimate, as more centrists, and more acceptable for the American administration or for European governments. And I think that really happened. So in a way, we can hope that I think Netanyahu is someone who did more than anyone else to make Israel a contested issue in the US. But yeah, I think here as well, the political field within the Jewish population in Israel is supposedly divided to right and left, but you talk to most of the self-proclaimed left or center left, and they just don't want to talk about Palestinian issues. They don't want to acknowledge, even if they acknowledge the Nakba, by the way, they would not acknowledge that the Nakba is still ongoing. That's something that's really important to understand. It's not a historical event, but an ongoing process of dispossession that started with the Zionist movement and peaked in 1948 and still ongoing. And you see the same ideology and the same practices of 1948 in display right now in Sheikh Jarrah, in Masafir Yatta, in the Jordan Valley, and also within Israel proper in the Negev desert, where communities of Bedouins that are supposedly Israeli citizens are being displaced. So this is something that we need to keep work on in every arena, and I think it's a big movement, Palestinian-led. With our job is within the Israeli society. You guys' jobs are in the US, and there are people all over the world within Jewish communities, within political parties, and we need to keep pushing and educating to connect these dots. And to make people realize the roots of the Zionist movement, this ongoing process, the lack of any real concept of citizenry in Israel at all. And to, how would I say that? To nurture a Jewish culture that isn't related to Zionism. And I think we need to create a story. I think the Zionist story is very strong, and I can understand why people are hooked up on it, you know, and are not willing to divorce from it. And I believed it for a very long time, longer than I care to admit. I think it's a strong story of people, dispossessed people, coming back to the land. It fails, but still very captivating, and we need to build a narrative that is just as strong. A narrative of hope, a narrative in which Jewish people have a place if they're willing to let go of supremacist ideas, and a narrative of a state or a space that can be inclusive to everyone. And that's what we need to work on in all arenas.
Yeah, I
make
think that the biggest problem we've had, everything has been very fear-based education.
Yes.
We're having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's on our end. We're having technical problems. We're having a bad signal situation here. Sometimes when we do it during the day, I think that happens more. I don't know why. You think there's more people on?
It's possible.
I don't know. But yeah, we are taught very fear-based thinking. And the Zionists used that. And I actually feel angry and used by it, because a very good portion of my life, I really believe that narrative. And it's very upsetting to me to feel like I was a tool in that. And I remember I've been to Israel once. I was there when I was 16 years old with Alexander Muss High School in Israel program, which is really just a group of entitled white Ashkenazi Jewish kids from Florida predominantly, coming over there with some sense of ownership. And now then when I see people doing birthright, it disgusts me to no end. Like, I mean, I
do ads on TV for that.
It's very frustrating to me. And where we live, this is very dominant. Like, this is any Jewish kid that grows up in South Florida, you're either going to do birthright or you're going to do high school in Israel. It's like part of your mission. And we're still in that way brainwashing little Zionist tools to continue it. And you've got groups like AIPAC here. AIPAC is the reason why more people won't speak up. AIPAC and DMFI are the reason why we have very few political leaders that will say anything, because even though they might agree, they don't have the courage to stand up to those organizations because they're scared of losing their position. And so this is what we're facing. We're facing, even with all the accurate information, we're still fighting this mountain of Zionist money that has basically bought our government.
Yeah, and I think fear-based education is very accurate, and it's the same here. And what you need to counter it is hope-based education, right? We really need that. And by the way, here and there, we are hearing about people who came here for birthright, and just being here opened their eyes to the realities. On the ground, it doesn't happen a lot, I think, but it happens sometimes. And there are excellent programs like Extend that pick up where birthright leaves people off and try to educate them. And we need to keep doing that. And we need to talk about hope, and we need to talk about Jewish heritage of social justice, right? And of inclusivity, because we have that. We don't have only that, but we have that in our history, in our heritage. And this sympathy to the Palestinian claim and empathy to Palestinian refugees, it's still today the largest group of refugees in the world. Almost 7 million Palestinian refugees in the West Bank, Gaza, neighboring countries. It's an ongoing crisis of just massive proportions. And for me, if I'm coming from a very personal point of view, I am the daughter of a refugee. So how can I not empathize with refugees and with this basic just claim of wanting to return home, of wanting to live a safe life? Why should it be a threat for me? Why should I fight it? Why should I not work for it? And you know, most people that live around me, whether they agree with me or not, they came from either refugehood or immigration, came here by this or that. Usually, somewhere in our histories, there's some kind of dispossession. So this aspiration for a just society, for a non-hierarchical society, this rejection of supremacy, that's the true lesson of you know, every persecution that our ancestors suffered. This is the true lesson of the Holocaust, as I see it.
You could almost say
yeah,
Zionism.
it's really perplexing that that people don't see it. And I think the dehumanization of Palestinians and Arabs and Muslim in general, but especially Palestinians, runs really deep, of course, in Israel, but I think in all Western societies. And that's something that really needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, and this is how I've started thinking about it, is that really Zionism is the antithesis of what Judaism is really about. And there are so many things that Zionism perpetuates. And somehow Jews, based on fear, have accepted this exception to what would actually be religious doctrine, because nowhere in the teachings in Judaism does it say oppress the other. Like that's not really what it's about. And it is ironic that post-Holocaust you had people like that were just completely destroyed going and doing the same thing to another group of people, and that we're still not seeing it. And I now have gotten to the point where you might support the right of an ethno-state, but I'm not going to let you do it and also claim it's a democracy and that it's not an apartheid state. So if you want to say, I support a Jewish ethno-state at all costs, fine, you're entitled to that opinion. I disagree with you. But you cannot then claim it's a democracy. You cannot claim that it's not an apartheid state. And these are just facts. Like people are not entitled to their own facts. You know, you're entitled to your opinion, but I cannot allow people to keep saying these things like without any sort of like challenge. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. No, the hell it is. You know, it's like when half your people or more than half your people don't have the same rights, you're not a democracy.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I feel, I mean, I can't imagine that if I were living in Israel that I would not be trying to be part of your resistance and trying to help and do whatever I could. And I actually have a question. Do you guys do delegations? I know that Eyewitness Palestine does some. They haven't announced any for this year yet, but like, do you guys do that? Because I really would love to go back with a different perspective. I would like to go back to the same places and see them from a different angle than I did when I was there.
Yeah. So well, first of all, we often host delegations. We don't organize them ourselves, but we host many groups as part of their Palestine visit. And one of our core activities for many years is tours to destroyed Palestinian villages, towns or cities, destroyed or just depopulated. Some of them still exist, but without the people, in which we just explore what was there and also try to reimagine what could be there when Palestinian return happens. And I find that very effective. We do this for Israeli groups, especially, and sometimes organize tours that are just open to anyone. Especially if you grew up, and I told you before that I grew up like all Israelis on Palestinian land and never knew this. Places that are really familiar, to see them in these new eyes, to realize that you don't know the real history of your own birthplace, on where you grew up, of where you live. You just don't know it. It's really eye-opening, and try to imagine what this space, this piece of land looked like just 75 years ago. It looked completely different. You just imagine a whole map, and we actually have some tools to help you imagine that, even if you're not really on the ground. We have the Nakba map on our website, Zochrot.org.
Okay.
And we have an app. We have a mobile app called I Return, the letter I Return, that you can download on Google Play or Apple Store, and actually see all the destroyed Palestinian localities. Click on them, learn about their histories, see historical and current photos of them, sometimes also videos. And if you are here, also navigate to them, use Google Map and explore them yourself. And we find that this mapping project is a really effective tool to help people understand what was erased from the landscape and from textbooks, and what is hidden from them. And, this is half the work already, to start reimagine what could be here, or what still can be here.
If people want to connect with you directly, can they go to Zochrot.org? Is there contact information there as well?
That's
Absolutely.
how I found her.
Okay. Well, you're the sleuth here, so you definitely have done what is certainly needed.
I'm just really trying to build as many bridges and make as many connections and connect as many anti-Zionist thinking people. I feel like the bigger the web is, the bigger the connection. So I like having I'm just trying to create as much information for people as possible. And I feel like it goes in so many different directions. Like, you didn't know about us, we didn't know about you. And now it's sort of like just one more connection. So I'm very appreciative.
Well, if you do end up making a trip out to Israel.
Oh, no, I'm definitely going to go back. And
you have a friend there now. So.
Well, I have I actually have family. I have family in the old city. And let's say that they're not probably very pleased with me. There are a lot of people in my family that are probably not talking to me. I don't really, because they're very into it. My cousin built the Chabad right here. I can't, this is it's ingrained. It's ingrained. I'm slowly but surely working on my dad. My dad is slowly but surely coming around, I'm trying. But I was on a Jewish Voice for Peace phone call recently, a big membership Zoom call. And there were over 300 people on it, which I was floored. And more than half of those people were older people, were people of my parents' generation, which pleased me even more, because I really figured that's the group that we need to reach that isn't as reachable here. And I was very pleasantly surprised. So I was somewhat hopeful from seeing that. And I do feel hopeful when I talk to people like you. And I just feel appreciative that I don't feel as lonely as a Jewish person anymore, because for like the past 10 years, like up until recently, I was just, I don't even know what to do with myself. And then I started affiliating with groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and meeting people. And it's much better now. So I appreciate you in that journey.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And yes, we're hearing more and more of people opening their eyes, and those journeys that we make, I think they hold a lot of information on how it can be done on, on a larger scale. And
yeah.
I really appreciate the work that you do and the chance to talk to you, because I think building these connections is crucial.
Thank you. And by the way, if there's anything that I can do in terms of a contact here for your organization, I don't know what sort of like, if you have any sort of like chapters or if you have things over here, like, I don't know, but feel free to reach out if there's anything I could ever do to help promote or help your organization.
Thank you.
Rachel, thank you so much for coming on this afternoon. Obviously, it is nighttime where you are, so we don't want to keep you too much longer. And of course, guys, if you currently are not either aware of Zochrot.org, please go over there, check it out.
Get educated.
Yeah, it's very important, because there's a lot of people down here, especially, the one silver lining that I will say, Rachel, as we depart, is the youth are all right. They definitely get this in a way that the older generation doesn't.
Yeah.
And very much like the first time I really noticed the splits was during the Bernie-Hillary primary in 2016, where it was so clear that at a certain age, it was like 45 or 50, everyone was skewing heavily towards Hillary. And everyone below that age was skewing heavily towards Bernie. And so a lot of that change that's coming, the skew is definitely in a very similar age range.
And a lot of the older people are dying off. And that is something that we actually have to like plan in our district. And thankfully, a lot of the old people are dying off and the young people are coming in. And that's what we need. We need to shift it,
Well, but it also depends on how active you're willing to be, because the older generation is extremely active and the younger generation is active to a point. And so staying involved is, definitely the key. But if they stay involved, then anything's possible. And so we can't thank you enough for coming on this afternoon.
It was nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Good work.
Much appreciated.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, imagine my complete surprise when I come across that there's literally an organization whose purpose is to educate about the thing that I've been like running around for the past 2 years with my head blowing off. How did I not know this? But now I think about it, and it is Martin Luther King Day. Oh, you mean when I was in Israel? Well, you know what? We didn't go to Palestinian areas. In fact, we were very much restricted in where we went. So we didn't see what I now want to go see. We didn't see that. We really didn't. And it was very, very skewed and very insulated. And, look, we didn't have social media. The information wasn't as readily available. I couldn't go on Instagram and see this. I follow something on Instagram called I Am Palestine. And that was not an existent concept. There was you didn't hear about the stuff, but no, it is embarrassing. And I feel horrible about it. And it's something that I have to it's penance. And this is a big part of why I'm doing this series, is because it's sort of, in my mind, if I can educate more people, then at least I'm trying to salvage what I can from where I come from. Like, I can't explain it. It's very disheartening, people. It really is. Like, this was a very difficult thing for me to deal with. It was not easy.
I think it's also logical that in any community, whatever it may be, this is Martin Luther King Day. And so there's a lot of people in all corners that are going to have a very loud bullhorn talking about how we have to care about people of color. But the truth is, you have gatekeepers in the white community and the black community. Excuse me. And so as a result of that, you are always going to have a hierarchical structure that is going to stay there, a la, You have who would be a good example? Al Sharpton would be a good example of that. And then in the Jewish community, you have people like a Bibi Netanyahu, but you also have them here in the United States. You have, yes, you have the Debbie Wasserman Schultzes of the world. They
Chuck
have
Schumer.
They have, yes, well, Ohio and
Adam Schiff.
Adam Schiff is a great example.
There's a lot of them, but you know what? I wanted to say something because when we were talking to Rachel, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, God, that's amazing. She grew up in Israel around the displaced places where the people lived, and they still weren't taught that.
Right.
And I don't know why I would even be remotely surprised. So do you remember a couple of years ago when I learned of the Tulsa massacre? Yeah. So we're Martin Luther King Day. The amount of history that we're not taught in this country that now somehow is being relegated as critical race theory is absurd. Okay. And we had Margaret come on that year to come and sort of give us the history lesson on the Tulsa massacre. So we're not taught history of how we treat the other. We're not taught how we treat the oppressed communities. We sure as hell weren't taught that what I now call six grandfathers was never meant to have presidents' faces carved in it. So like, we're not taught accurate history. And I think the more that we wake up, and you still see they're still pushing inaccurate history. They're still wanting to ban books. This is why I'm so vehemently, like, completely non-negotiable pro First Amendment. Because it isn't everybody's right to say something as much as it's everybody's right to hear something. And I am not liking when you stifle conversation, because that's how we become more and more ignorant. We are not taught proper history. So on MLK Day, let's be aware of that from a global perspective, that we are not taught proper history. I don't like that I wasn't taught about what happened to the indigenous people. Not properly. Not properly. I'm not talking about the pilgrims and the Indians sitting down and our little kids making hand turkeys and putting feathers in their hair.
Oh, come on. Were you the pilgrim or the Indian? I was the Indian.
I don't even remember. I didn't like any of that crap. The thing is that, you know, now knowing what we know, why are we still having that? Why are we still having, like, I don't understand that.
Change doesn't seem to come easy for a lot of people.
No. So apparently it's just the nature of colonialism. The nature of white supremacy is that wherever we go, we dismantle, genocide, displace, and get rid of the indigenous people, lie about who they were, whitewash their entire culture, and then not teach anybody after the fact that it even happened. That seems to be the thing. And here's what I'm noticing. It's not really working out well for us. It's really not. Not really. I mean, when you live in a world that we're the richest country in the world. Are we the richest country? Okay. Yeah. And yet people are barely able to make ends meet. And that's successful. And again, how is that successful?
And again, it's not a few people.
It's
most tens of millions of people.
It's a majority are barely getting by.
I'm not going to say it's a majority. What I would say it's that, I mean,
what are you talking about? Most Americans couldn't afford a $400 emergency.
Is it safe to say that there is over 100 million people in this country right now that are struggling to just live? Yes, they are. Like, literally to just live. That's pretty bad.
It's all bad. I was just talking about this with my son the other day, like how we're just basically so brainwashed and how it's swung so far that we accept so little. And it can be summed up by the phrase, this is one of my favorite phrases, student lunch debt. Did you know there's student lunch debt?
I sure do.
Okay. So student lunch debt, when you are in a country that has something called student lunch debt, I think it's time to really acknowledge that you're a failure as a country. I'm sorry, but that's just, if you are a country as rich as this, but then you have a phrase like that, you're a failure. You've completely failed your people. And the only thing that keeps us where we are is might makes right and military colonialism. Because I got to tell you, when it comes to like grading in terms of like our citizenry, we get big old F. And that goes for our education too. This is why I can't stand holidays like this. It just puts me on a rampage. And not to mention all the friggin' sanctimonious liberals that probably don't know the first thing really about Martin Luther King, sitting there and quoting him.
Well, I would say that probably more than anything else, the importance of today, as I'm often, or we had pointed out, is Martin Luther King was not assassinated because he was preaching racial equality. He was assassinated because he was trying to mess with the economic neoliberal world order.
In terms of labor, in terms of union organizing and anti-war sentiment.
Second you start doing that is you're on the radar.
It was the anti-Vietnam thing was a huge thing for him.
Why do you think Fred Hampton was assassinated? He was assassinated because he was trying to bring rural whites and urban blacks together. And the second you start doing that is you start messing with the economic world order. And there are people in very high places that, like I'm going to say it, like the Bill Gates of the world, all they have to do is just a wink and a nod. They don't have to say anything. It's much like when Hillary knew what was going on regarding sabotaging Bernie during the 2016 primary. Did she have to outright say that we're rigging this primary? Or did she just have to give a wink and a nod to certain people to basically say, I don't know nothing, I don't care, just get me elected by any means necessary, I don't give a shit.
Didn't work well.
No, ultimately the queen couldn't get the crown, but
nothing pleases me
she
more.
tried very, very hard. And that is correct. He was deemed a threat.
But not because of why most people would think. He was deemed a threat because he saw the class war. He saw the class war. He was a socialist. This is somebody who believed in basically coordinating all the poor people together to take over the top people. That's extremely dangerous. It wasn't because he was talking about...
Fair point, Marcus. Very fair point. This one's for anybody who's ever been persecuted for smoking.
Nobody wants you to smoke for them. You don't need to smoke. Just smoke for yourself. But I would also argue that there are very many Black leaders. Well, because you wait until I smoke it, you got to feel it. Like that don't get the recognition they deserve, whether it was because they weren't able to whitewash them as much. Like, let's say Malcolm X, maybe his history couldn't be as whitewashed and I don't know. What would you call it? Like acceptable to white people as, let's say, Dr. King. Like it was. There's just more of an amenable personality, a more fall in line personality.
Well,
I don't know.
Dr. King and Malcolm X definitely had very similar messages. The difference is that MLK was much more stoic and presentable in the way he did it, whereas Malcolm was very in your face and very unapologetic about it.
And there were a lot of people like that we don't talk about. And one of my favorite people, and just for anybody, like I have a personal Instagram, but I've posted 2 things in like 5 years. And one was the other day, I actually reposted this. It was this really cool video clip of James Baldwin. There are many. And it was just very, very poignant. A lot of things he said were very poignant. But he is one of those people in history that I feel like we just do not give enough due and credit. And he was so brilliant and ahead of his time.
If you have never seen the debate between James Baldwin and I'm forgetting.
Who are you talking about
right now? The gentleman who was part of the
Buckley.
William F. Buckley. If you have never seen the debate between
James Baldwin,
William F. Buckley and James Baldwin,
it's glorious.
I highly recommend that you see it.
He was just a beautiful, brilliant person. Like the way he spoke was beautiful and eloquent, and just he's very poetic. Well, I mean, I was a poet, but like for somebody to be poetic, but also be saying things that are so relevant and poignant in the moment. Like a lot of people are good poets, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to really speak about what's going on in the moment poetically.
That's correct. And let's also not forget, James Baldwin was very close, apparently more than just friends with Marlon Brando. So he had quite an impact on society
Marlon Brando was very, very fluid in a lot of ways, always was. And it was one of those things that, we're so much more puritanical about stuff now than we were then. I don't think it was necessarily public knowledge, but definitely in those circles, there was a lot of fluidity. And Marlon Brando was very all over the place.
Yes.
And also a very kind of artistic minded person.
Well, I think Marlon was also odd on purpose.
I don't know. I think he was, he was just very much, I think, very smart, very artistic, very in his own head. There's certain people that are just artists.
By the way, if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, see that film. That's a film that will really open your eyes. Yeah. I guess
See, now I filled it for you. See, now you'll like it. Yeah, Cornell is brilliant. I met Cornell West. It was embarrassing for me. I was an idiot. It happened. I hope he just, you know what? I'm sure it just is not anything he would ever remember because
I just went up in smoke.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
There you go.
I was an idiot in front of Cornell West. That's what
Well,
happened.
big fan you were. And
big fan I was. And that was embarrassing.
We do have to talk about, obviously, this big story. I think, and of course, it's assuming that we even are able to get, for those of you who are joining us late, we've had a very modest amount of people who have been watching today. Our
There's a lot of competition
internet
today.
Connection is really off.
It's not bad right this second.
No.
It's fine right now. What is it you're wanting to talk about? Biden? Are you wanting to talk about Biden documents?
Come on, man. It's very important.
Can I tell you, I don't even pay attention to any of this. It's like a circus. This is a circus.
Boy, that looks like a stoic gentleman of some sort. All right.
He's missing his white hood.
Well, he sure looks like it. But so for those of you who obviously know, one of the things that we do point out on our show, even though we are certainly on the populist left side of politics, is the hypocrisy that we see all too often when it comes to, sort of this good versus evil type of political nonsense that both sides try to perpetuate day in, day out. As we know, former President Trump was caught with classified documents. And so that was turned into a very big story, but one that now has come full circle. Why? Because President Biden, who wasn't president at the time, which makes it even worse, has classified documents in technical.
We're having internet connectivity issues.
So House Oversight Chair wants more information on Biden docs from the White House. So James Comer on Sunday slammed President Joe Biden and his team for their handling of classified docs. And they mentioned since State of the Union. We would never have known about the possession of the classified docs were it not for investigative reporting by CBS that somehow got a leak. Obviously, that is from inside the White House, no question about it, to determine that this had happened prior to the election. Now, why is this significant? Because, again, if this information had been presented, whether prior to the 2020 election or even the 2022 election, there is no question that this type of impropriety would have played a role in a number of independent, again, this is also the big problem we talk about all the time with the Democratic liberal mindset of it's Democrats versus Republicans. No, it's actually not. It's Democrats here, Republicans there, and independents, which make up over half the voting population. And they ultimately decide which side they want to go to. So if a story like this were to come out, they may decide, well, listen, I can't stand Trump. Oh, I can't stand the Republicans, blah, 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 blah. But if there's one thing I do know is that the ultimate institutional politician, which is Joe Biden, I do not want to send him to the White House for 4 years, or I do not want a Democratic majority in the House or Senate in 2022.
Or I think it looks like he's deceased and just being propped up by a bunch of elder abusing opportunists. I don't know.
Now, the reason, and of course, we all have these theories here, any additional information that's worth mentioning is essentially what was responded to from the Kentucky representative to CNN's Jake Tapper. The administration hasn't been transparent about what's going on with President Biden's possession of classified documents. That is absolutely true. And we just want equal treatment here with respect to how both former President Trump and current President Joe Biden are being treated with the document issue. I think it's very cut and dry. Is on a technicality, and that's really the thing here, on a technicality, is Joe Biden guilty of mishandling classified documents? The answer is yes, he is. And in part because when he had these classified documents, he was the vice president. He's not even legally allowed to have possession of them. This is a question of how much whether or not it was overreach regarding President Trump and what he did with classified documents. Remember, the president has the authority, the chief executive has the authority to classify and declassify documents. Now, in this case, President Biden was not the president at the time and was in possession of classified documents. So now the question becomes, are we going to start an impeachment trial in this congressional session? And as we've talked about, I've always maintained it's very likely to happen. And now that you have concrete grounds in order to do it, will it happen is the question. I think yes, you think.
I don't care.
But do you think it will happen?
I mean, look, if there's a way for them to sort of level the playing field, I guess, because think about it, in 24, you could potentially be looking at 2 former impeached presidents running against each other for president.
Boy, that would be something.
Well, I mean, it's just,
this
to me,
country
I don't
deserves
follow
it.
any of this. And here's the truth. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about the classified documents.
But
I really don't. Now, tell me if there's been a negative effect from something. But the fact that they just go after this to go after this, is that, it's like going after Al Capone for tax evasion. I feel like, you know, when you're dealing with people that have committed crimes against humanity, the fact that we're sitting there and nitpicking over who had what documents where, that to me is so, like, irrelevant.
Friend of the show, TM Martin of Political Coffee, says, story of The Intercept says that Biden used the classified documents accusation against Jimmy Carter's CIA nomination. And this, it just goes to show you how long Joe Biden has been in politics.
All of it's disgusting. All of it is absolutely disgusting. But my point is, this to me seems like something that has probably happened to every single administration and has always existed. And so to just be going after that it's almost like, I can't, like, find some other unprofessional or totally nepotism type thing that's happened in any administration. Like, it's just none of that's, let's just say this. If these people weren't committing war crimes and profiting off of the suffering of other people, I don't think I'd give a shit about any of that stuff. It's kind of like if my representative was, let's say, corrupt, but was amazing and did really good things and actually really helped the people and did all that stuff, I don't know that I would notice that they were as corrupt. Like, I just feel like this is kind of small.
It's kind of like the argument with Katie Porter. It's like Katie Porter is as good as it gets on the Hill, and there are people that are coming out now, including Dear White Staffers, I think is the account.
Yeah.
That are basically saying that she is a bitch.
Okay.
And
so don't hang out. Don't be friends.
And if you work for her, understand that she has somewhat of a militant approach to running her operation. And so what does that tell you? It tells me that on the one hand, it matters very much that you have a representative that is working her ass off. If she was just somebody acting like
entitled,
like a Nancy Pelosi who doesn't really do anything,
or like our representative,
our representative who has the same reputation, only doesn't get anything done, is actually a net negative of the highest order, yeah, then that's a problem. And people will speak out about that. But the difference with somebody like Katie is that she gets stuff done and good stuff. You see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
When you hear politicians say, I get stuff done, like, oh, you get bad stuff.
Well, and I'm so tired of hearing about people's personality traits. Then don't work for them. Don't be friends with them. You know, that's not my issue. Yeah, would I prefer to hear that everybody treats their staff great? Of course I would. But that does not negate that's like when people say, you know, if you don't like somebody personally, then they're not necessarily good at what they do. That's not how this works.
No, I agree with that. And again, you got stop with the Trump Putin stuff. Like, it's not going to fly on this show. So don't try it. You want to say that they're in bed with the Saudis? That I agree with, because that's who Jared Kushner has been doing business deals with. And now Elon Musk apparently is involved with that nonsense as well, over in Qatar. So let's keep it. But like you said, it's all the different oligarchs and all that stuff.
Why do people care what language your oligarchs speak? Again, this is a global class war.
But we care on this channel whether or not the Russians are getting proper treatment.
First of all, I don't.
You'll all be speaking Sputnik before it's all done.
No, we'll all be speaking Mandarin.
Oh, get out of here! They do not have anywhere near as many nuclear explosives as we have, so that's going to be a big problem. I do believe that the leak came from inside the White House, and I think it's coming for 2 reasons. Number one, I think a lot of them...
You think they want to get rid of Joe?
Well, they want to get rid of Joe for a couple of reasons.
But they don't have anyone else to put there.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I think they would want to have a primary. But they want to have that primary for a number of reasons. First one, of course, is that right now, if the money is on the table, whether it's Joe Biden against Donald Trump or especially Ron DeSantis, Joe Biden is going to lose. And I think that there are enough people that are there that are saying, well, we don't want to have blood on our hands, so to speak, knowing full well that our current president is in full cognitive decline. He isn't going to be capable of campaigning in 15 to 20 states around the country to convince people to come out and vote for him.
They're going to have to it'll be like that movie Dave. They're going to have to get a Joe replica, a double, right? Doppelganger to go around.
George W. Bush had doppelgangers. He had doppelgangers.
It's just so creepy.
And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're going to do the same thing with Joe.
I don't know that you can find somebody that old and decrepit that isn't actually him.
No, that's true. I do think that there is... and look, I think that there's international sabotage.
But let's say, okay, whatever. So they want to get rid of Joe. They want to eliminate him as an option. Okay.
Sure.
Who are they putting up? Okay. Team Clinton is going to put up Pete or Gavin.
Kamala.
Okay. So that's Team Clinton.
Or even Kamala.
They're not going to really at this point. I feel like it's a joke.
They've invested so much political capital in the woke nonsense, even though she's so
But
inept,
at this point, they need to see that as a sunk cost.
Maybe they will do that.
They're going to put up Pete and Gavin Newsom, right? So that'll be Team Clinton.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'll get, I mean, honestly, I'm trying to think of who will, it's going to be ugly. Now the Republican primary is going to be so entertaining because you're going to get Trump and Pence and DeSantis all in there together. It's going to be
now apparently Kristi Noem from South Dakota is Kristi Noem.
And you'll get well, you know who will come off looking really good is oh God, what's her name? I always forget her name. The one they all like.
Nikki Haley.
Yeah, Nikki Haley. She'll come off looking like the one. Because they're all going to implode amongst themselves, except she won't. She'll sort of, it's a good opportunity for her.
And you bring up a really good point, TM, is that what exactly are they, Biden is a sitting duck the second that the corporate establishment chooses not to protect him at all.
See,
costs.
Now this changes everything for me. Biden has a Corvette?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool.
Everything's
no, I didn't know that. See, now that changes everything for me.
Jen lets her liberal privileged side come out every once in a while. It's like, oh, he drives a Corvette. In that case,
no, that's not why. And by the way, because my dad had two, and my parents were working people, and this was back in the 70s, and I love old Corvettes. I don't. It's not the new ones. I'm thinking an old one.
Marquise, the problem with Bernie is running a third time almost never works, and he'll never capture the same energy that he had the last two times. And that's not because he doesn't have a great message. It's because of his capitulation both times, and especially the last time, in a way that he didn't have to, but he chose to. And you could say it was COVID. You could say whatever you want. But people will look at Bernie and say, I love your message. I really believe in you, but I know you're going to cave when when push comes to shove.
He's not going to take it all the way.
Can't do that.
I feel like that a third time is just not going to happen. It's just not. There is no one in the Democratic side, in the Democratic Party, that is remotely capable of beating the people on the other side. There just isn't. There's nobody in the Democratic field that can beat several of the people on the Republican side.
If it was up to corporate media, this is the matchup
That's
they
the dream.
want. That's the one they want.
That would be like a Rocky IV situation.
Yeah, it would.
It would be really. And it would be
East
very red.
West.
It would be red, blue.
Only in this case, it's Florida versus California.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be
they would make so much money.
The headlines would sell themselves, and the debates would be crazy.
It would be awesome, but I don't know that it. And Newsom is definitely, once you take the Californians out of it, because they don't like him particularly, but he's definitely more, I think, aesthetically appealing to most people in the Democrat that are party people.
Now, don't get me wrong. If it's Newsom versus DeSantis, it's DeSantis all the way.
Oh, yeah.
But you're going to...
I'm talking within the party. I mean, Newsom versus Pete, it's Newsom will come out on top of that.
The big problem that the Democrats have right now is that you're trying to there is a populist uprising that is happening in this country, and the Democratic Party is working tooth and nail to stop it, including defanging the squad. And we haven't even got, and I don't even know when we'll get into AOC's latest rant. Well, we won't do it today, but
it was like an anti-force the vote.
It was basically saying that these guys didn't get any concessions, and I'm thinking, no, they got a lot of concessions. And then your response to that is, well, you're going to have enemies within your caucus now. And I'm just thinking, is that Alex? Is that you?
This is why I still do not understand. Somebody needs to explain to me the point of even having a progressive caucus.
If you're not going to cause a ruckus.
I just don't understand what the point of it is. The whole point of a caucus is to have your own little power block. The whole point of a caucus is a power block. If you don't do anything with it, is it just sort of like one of those clubs that you just sign your name because it looks good on your resume?
This is the problem.
Like, I don't get it. Like, if you're the chair of that caucus, is it something, really, is it a resume material and just a real non-functioning thing? I would love for somebody in that caucus to tell me why we even have one. Because if the best you can do is retract a nicely worded letter asking for diplomacy while still granting ludicrous sums of money, then I don't see the point.
I agree. I don't really see the point, and I don't really see what Alex's point was either, other than you're trying to stonewall this movement that is desperate for something. There isn't a fight right now that is being perpetuated on the left, and you're conceding everything to Hakeem Jeffries?
Without even, this is...
Not even a slight push.
No discussion. Was there a discussion?
Do you think...
Is there no one else who could have been suitable? Could we have not even had a debate about the best person? Like, I'm telling you.
And here's an idea.
This is absurd.
And this is the thing where people lose trust. So when you say, well, we have to be a united Democratic Party so we can get policy passed because we might be able to convince a few Republicans to come to our side. Who is the Speaker of the House? Your bills, supposedly, listen, you should be fighting for Medicare for all right now just to make sure that McCarthy doesn't bring it to the floor and create momentum. But you're not going to do that because you have too many corrupt members of your own party that don't want it because they are bought and paid for, like our representative, by corporate special interests, including private insurance and big pharma. You are either going to fight as you need to, which means that you are going to have people in your own party hate your guts and wish you were out of politics.
I don't understand why you're there.
Because it's a great life.
Well, I mean, yes, but I would like some of them to justify why you're a member of a caucus that doesn't do anything. And by the way, there's a lot of people. Chantel Brown is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So clearly it doesn't mean anything.
You said the progressive word has been completely destroyed.
Yeah. Well, okay. So be that as it may, regardless of what the name means, then I don't understand the point of being a voting contingency if you don't make anything be contingent on your vote.
And not a vote on
like,
anything. Not even doing? One. You haven't even tried it one time.
Nothing.
And you're allowing Matt Gaetz to get to the left.
I got to tell you. And okay, so I saw,
so
so you forwarded me that Matt Gaetz was on Tim Pool.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, and I'm not a fan of Matt Gaetz. I think he's pretty friggin' douchey. But he comes off, if you see him on Rogan, extremely reasonable and rational, and like he's actually one of the people putting up a good fight against the corporate nonsense.
And he knows exactly. And let me tell you, you can hate Matt Gaetz from now until the end of time, ladies and gentlemen. Rick Scott is in his late 60s. I'll give Rick Scott probably until 2036, the latest, that he's going to be in the U.S. Senate, because Matt Gaetz is going to get there eventually. He knows exactly what he's doing.
The only thing that can stand his way is certain legal complications.
That's correct. And he's got him. And he's got him. But you know what? They always manage to go away. And one of the reasons it goes away is because of his daddy. Sorry, Matt. I can't.
Well, there's that. And again,
well.
I have very, my thoughts on the whole thing about him with the girl thing is like, it's complicated because I do find him lechy and gross. But he's allowed
to get on there. And he's allowed to state the truth about what it's like doing business on the Hill. That is completely open if somebody like AOC or Cori Bush or Jamal Bowman or Rashida Tlaib, anybody, you have this wide open opportunity to be speaking about what really goes on, and you're letting Matt Gaetz do this?
Well, and think about how ridiculous this is. These people who didn't get concessions for even voting for a minority speaker, like the minority leader, right? Like you didn't get, and the other side gets concessions for their vote for the Speaker of the House. That's arguably a lot bigger of a hurdle to overcome than voting for the minority leader position.
Great, full circle here regarding Katie Porter and Dianne Feinstein. There are what you would call the true blue liberals that are here in Broward, and a number of them support Jen. And a number of them had their opinions because they all watched The View, and whether they agree or not agree with what was said. But the one thing that I found interesting was that a number of them agreed that we need to have term limits. And Matt Gaetz, of all people, lays out why term limits actually make sense. And so when you have people on the left now saying that we need to have term limits because of a situation like Dianne Feinstein, that is one of the concessions that Matt Gaetz and that contingent of the GOP was able to get out of Kevin McCarthy.
Well, can we just mention for a second what we mean by contingent? Because what these people are getting, they're not getting these things. They're getting votes on those things. Let us all question for a moment, why is it that our representatives have to fight so hard to just get a vote on something? See, this to me is absurd. Everything should be able to have a vote. Everything should be able to have a vote. If you're keeping things from having a vote, then that's the opposite of a democracy. Am I wrong? So we're fighting over. We're not even fighting over the issues. They're fighting over even allowing them to be voted on. That's where we are, people.
And that's not the worst one of all. When they say that the GOP didn't get any real concessions or ones that will be longstanding, I will tell you that aside from the military budget cut, there was one in particular that is not getting talked about enough. And that one is they have now prevented the House Speaker and anyone within the GOP caucus from preventing I guess the technical term or the technical way
anybody can get rid of the speaker.
Well, it's not. That's not it. What it is if you are in a safe district. Now, whatever the definition of a safe district may be, +7, +8, anything above that considered a safe district. And so what is now happening as a result in the GOP side, now, of course, it's not going to happen in the Democratic side because they're not fighting for that. But on the GOP side, if it is a GOP safe district, the GOP hierarchy stays out of the primaries. These candidates are now allowed to go head to head in a primary. And why are they able to do that? Because no matter what, the winner is going to be a member of the political party in question, in this case, the GOP. They do not have that in the Democratic Party. They did not agree to those terms, where somebody like Hakeem Jeffries can bring in his AIPAC money and sabotage a non-corporate candidate running for office in a democratically safe blue district. That should be a major talking point. Why is the GOP doing this and the Democratic Party isn't? That's a big deal.
So you're saying, wait. I was lost for a second. You're saying they want to have a vote on dark money in their primaries?
Yeah, the GOP voted against dark money coming after primary challengers in safe red districts.
Oh my God! See, this is I don't understand how the Democrats.
Here,
oh my God!
When you come on here, anybody who is on the Democratic side who comes on here to complain that the GOP is bad, there is a reason we've been telling you for a while that Ron DeSantis is the next president. You have to look at these little things and realize that they're much bigger than people are making them out to be.
They look better.
They
look better. They're actually, you're talking about they're fighting for democratic principle things. One of the concessions, one of the things they got was their ability to more easily remove a speaker that isn't working for their party. The Republicans are actually much more concerned with democracy within their own party.
Right.
They're not concerned with it for the rest of us, mind you, but they are definitely more concerned with democracy within their party structure, and the Democrats are not.
No, because the Democrats know that well, this is also part of the reason, and listen, this is why this conversation can go on forever, but there's a reason why the national security state has completely ingrained themselves within the Democratic side versus the GOP side. Because for them, it's about permanent Washington. It's about keeping the institutions as they are and buying off whichever side they have to in order to keep it that way. There used to be a huge contingent on the Democratic side, especially during the Bush years, that was against what the FBI and the CIA and the NSA were doing. As it stands today, it's completely flipped itself around. There's always going to be one side that says we're against it and one side that says they're for it. That's how this continues and how it never changes. Imagine if Jen were to run for Congress again against Wasserman Schultz, and what prospect it would mean if she didn't have to worry about the Democratic Party establishment hierarchy dipping their, sticking their nose involved in the race.
No, what if I didn't have to worry about AIPAC? Because that's the thing.
This is a plus 12D district. There is no reason for them to worry at all about what goes on around here. Yeah, the GOP candidate who ran, Carla Spalding, who ran against Debbie this last election, got within 10 points. That's still a 10-point margin that isn't going to get broken. And this was the ultimate wave. So to say that these seats are safe would be an understatement. They do not want to challenge the corporate hierarchy. That's what it's about. It's not about left versus right, blue versus red. This is about labor versus ownership and corporate special interests versus working class
and
interests.
in a lot of cases, it's AIPAC. It really is. AIPAC has basically, over the past few years, realized how successful they are. They have basically made it their mission to not allow one more member of the squad. Now, I would argue to them, based on what the squad does, I don't see why it matters to you, because it's not like they're actually like forming a block and doing anything as a squad. So I don't see why it would matter. I could see why they wouldn't like me. I mean, that I get. I mean, if I were them, I wouldn't like me either.
Stoic, I definitely agree with your sentiment here. And
yeah, that's a problem.
But this is a credential that a lot of people
that's a problem
are going to like. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
There are people who know that he is not only a former soldier, a member of JAG, but he's also got a bloodthirsty streak that Trump doesn't have. But there are going to be people on the right that are going to love it.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people. No. And I would also bring up,
agreed,
which president was it in recent years that promised to shut down Guantanamo Bay? Who was that? Oh, it was Obama.
Let's not bring it up.
Yeah,
it's a bad idea.
Let's bring it up because, you know, Obama was the person who, that was one of his points when he was running, was about shutting down Gitmo. And yet still going on, still going strong, still doing it, still torturing people. The whole thing. And we actually feel like we have some sort of moral high horse about Putin and what he's doing in Ukraine. Like, yeah, it's horrible. Imperialism is a horrible thing, but it's so bizarre to me that you can point it out and not see the hypocrisy. How do we have a place like Guantanamo Bay and then think we can talk, or how are we trying to extradite Julian Assange? Let's say that. And then we're somehow saying we're this beacon of like righteousness.
We're not.
No. And this is why the hypocrisy is suffocating.
So when we see the hypocrisy on the supposed left movement, you cannot be hesitant to call it out. It is necessary. The fight must come from the populist left, because if it doesn't, you will concede everything to the likes of Matt Gaetz. People are desperate and they don't care anymore. So if you're going to allow the GOP to be the appealing party, especially to young people, oh boy, you're totally.
I got to tell you, when I see stuff like this, they're more appealing to me. Now I know better, but not everybody knows more than what they see. So they'll look at that and they'll be very drawn to that. You know, these are people that are actually taking a stand and fighting. And I have to tell you, that's what people want. And this is something that I was watching on that dude Dissidents. Yeah. They were talking about one of their big issues was about they were talking about how DSA doesn't want, I forget which squad members, to be able to say that you can no longer say you're a member of DSA, that you voted to impede a strike.
AOC, Jamal Bowman, and Cori Bush.
Okay. So I have to tell you, I agree. You do not get to be part of Democratic Socialists of America if you vote to impede a strike. Period.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. I don't care. Stay out of it. You don't impede a strike. That's the whole point. The whole point. Like, and so I have to tell you, I actually agree with that.
If you like our content and you enjoy what we're
All
talking
five
about,
of you.
go to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a wonderful member of our small but mighty growing organization. We're almost at 8,200 subscribers.
I'm contemplating us having a Substack.
Maybe that might be, yeah.
I'm thinking about that. So anyway, now that I found out that they do video.
If you're feeling generous for $10 a month, you can become a member, getting yourself a mansion parliamentarian, still favorable for the 2024 election, and the Lulu sticker, always adorable. We all know that. But for the very generous people, $25 a month gets you.
I remember I thought, God, it won't be that hard to get to 10,000 people. We'll be able to have a merch store. And that is what I ultimately want to do. But we have been unable and suppressed. And a lot of it, you know what gets limited? Certain things that you put in headlines are getting us limited monetary. We have to I really wish we had somebody that knew all this stuff. That did our stuff. No, certain things that get limited monetization, and I don't care. Limited monetization.
Or maybe we need to change like the spelling around and stuff.
You have to put certain. That's what I'm saying. And so Bo is really good at that too.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about. Yeah, maybe we should try that. Let's try some of what works for them.
I don't know. I feel like, but you're putting things in the headline to get people to get the thing, but like the headline is something that we might just mention.
See?
Oh, double K. Okay, so here's something. Explain this to me. Double K, you got to hear this. So screw our post office. So I sent out your pencils and Nevin's pencils on the exact same day, in the exact same manner, via my mailbox with the little red flag up. Same postage, same envelope, same everything. Okay. I'm so glad to hear you got yours, because Nevin's got returned to me. And here's what really pisses me off. So I put 2 stamps on it, which is enough via weight. And yet the post office returns it, says insufficient postage, but they counted my stamps. They used my stamps and then sent it back to me for insufficient postage. So now I have to resend it. But anyway, I find that very annoying, but I'm very glad you got yours. Why did that happen?
The post office is a problem, so is FedEx. It's all a problem. The whole system is collapsing around us.
It's crumbling.
Go to Cash App, or as John Mellencamp says, it's all crumbling down. Go to Cash App, $Gen Change, if you are so inclined. We appreciate that support. And then, of course, what is the discussion on Wednesday? Well, thanks to TM, we will now discuss that. On Wednesday, we are going to have at least one member of Fair Vote, as well as a State House representative in Oklahoma. The gentleman's name is slipping me right now. I think it's Mickey. Let me look at it.
Mickey, you're so
no,
bad.
he
Not
may,
like that.
I don't know if Mickey Stokins, I think is his name. Anyway, he's a huge advocate for ranked choice voting. And ranked choice voting just passed in Nevada. And we now have 6 states in the country that have the type of voting systems that are not technically not a first past the post voting option. So that is something that we're trying to change. And I think ultimately we will get there. Ranked choice voting is now in Alaska, Maine, and Nevada. Jungle primaries, or top 2 primaries, are now in California, Washington, and Louisiana. So we do have a handful of options that are out there, but obviously
ranked choice voting, when you say ranked choice voting in those states, is that something that is in their primary as well as their general, or is it just in their general? And then also certain municipalities have it, but not others as well. Like, for example, New York City, they have that, but the state doesn't have that, do they?
New York only has it in New York City for the mayoral race. It's not for anything else.
That's okay. That's my point, is that certain places, which it's still better. That's one of those things that absolutely can happen gradually and piecemeal. It can. It's not the same as we could argue about whether or not universal health care can happen that way. But ranked choice voting clearly can and is happening that way. So guys, let's get that happening. Florida will not be up there with you.
No, we're
What are you
definitely.
doing?
I'm
You're
just trying to
distracting
find. I know.
me.
I'm just trying to find out the name of the gentleman who's coming on Wednesday. But
But
anyway,
we will be discussing ranked choice voting. Is your point?
yes, ranked choice voting is the main topic of discussion on Wednesday. We are going to have a panel. We're still trying to get at least one person from the Forward Party to come on and talk. Maybe we'll message Andrew, see if he might be available. You want to text him?
I could text him. When is this? We're doing it Wednesday
at 9
night.
o'clock.
Come on, Wednesday night. I don't know. I'll ask him.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I think that this is going to be, a very important conversation the following week. We are doing a crossover podcast with Due Dissidence. That'll be at 9 o'clock next Monday. And then on Wednesday of next week, we are also doing another crossover podcast. It will be with Mark Savant, who is a very noted content creator and runs his own YouTube channel and all that. So that'll be a lot of fun. Obviously, we like to plan in advance as best we can, but plans always change. We know that. So again, please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, do all those wonderful things. Thanks for putting up with us for this afternoon. Double K, you are way too generous. We love you very, very much. For anybody else,
Honestly, I think I'm gonna adopt her as like my surrogate mom on the show, because my mom doesn't watch. I don't think my mom watches the show.
Even if she did, she wouldn't be donating like that, even though she probably could. But just
no. But I just
TM, always a pleasure, and thank you all, you guys. Stoic.
No, not tomorrow.
Double
Wednesday.
K,
Wednesday.
Paul, Wednesday at 9 p.m.
Our usual time.
Yes.
I don't particularly love doing daytime shows.
No, but this was an exception today for somebody.
Yes, for somebody who is in Israel time, and I do exceptions for different. You know what?
That was the only reason.
Okay, and here's the thing, and I'm putting this out there to all you content creator dads, all of you, all you content creator dads that can't seem to manage to get on a podcast past 7 o'clock at night. Let me explain something to you. I am not altering my schedule for that any longer. If you live in the United States of America, and yes, that includes Hawaii, you can participate at our regular time, and it is a normal working hour time for a podcast. I am sorry. If you live overseas, then I will consider, doing a daytime show. But all of you,
I think she's calling you out, Steve.
I'm not just Steve. There's others. There's others.
Jordan's going to turn into it as
Let
well.
me tell you something. Sam, all of you guys. All right. I get it. You love your kids. Okay. I get it. But you know what? This is grown up time, and we do evening podcasts. There you go.
We'll see you Wednesday at 9 o'clock.